Tier lists in TF2 have been done to death. The meta of which classes are specialists and generalists, who counters who and so on is all well worn by now. But that got me thinking, how did the mercs perform at tasks outside of the battlefield? In particular, which of these 9 trained mercenaries has the best dance moves? To test this, I'll be looking at each of the mercs performing the conga taunt, because it's the only dancing taunt I own. I'll be rating each of them on their skill in the art of dance, how well their moves reflect their personality, and whether they embody the joyful spirit of the conga. First off is Scout. As you'd expect with his high energy personality, Scout is very enthusiastic about dancing the conga. While his movements are clearly unrefined, his enthusiastic clapping and the vigor with which he moves his legs, almost akin to a shuffle, shows that while his technical ability at dance may not be high, he is clearly approaching the conga with a lot of enthusiasm. Scout says, "I do this all the time, I could do this for money. I don't, but I could." And this shows that he's very confident in his conga, due to his having executed the dance on many occasions. All that being said, it's also evident that Scout does not display a high degree of control or finesse with his movements, relying on sheer energy to pick up where technicality lacks. This amateurishness may be somewhat endearing, but it means that I can't place Scout any higher than a B tier. Soldier's conga has always seemed at odds with his personality to me. For a character who's supposedly brutish and aggressive, Soldier's conga is fairly subtle, to the point of almost seeming stiff. His arm movements are caged and sluggish, and it doesn't seem like he's really feeling the music very much at all. Strangely, he seems to bob his head quite hard on the 1 of each bar, which does emphasis that he's locked in with the beat, but the sudden jerky movement comes across awkward and doesn't gel with the Latin rhythms of the music. That being said, his legwork is quite solid, as can be seen with the smooth quarter turn stutter step each time he kicks with the opposite foot. Again, for a character with very slow walking speed, one would not necessarily expect their footwork to be their greatest strength. To some degree, I enjoy the juxtaposition of Soldier's awkward, stiff dance with his character. For example, using it to taunt on someone after just bombing in from a stratosphere is quite funny, but I have to admit that humour is ultimately stemming from the fact that this dance feels out of place. D tier. For some reason, Pyro's movements while performing the conga remind me of the idiosyncratic gesticulations of Jeff Goldblum. The exaggerated circular arm motions with the wrist held back are joyfully camp, reminiscent of ballroom vogue dancing, signalling Pyro's historical adjacency to gender nonconformity and queerness. It's very clear from the happy Pyro noises that they're having a good time, which makes sense given what we know about Pyrovision. Their whole life is effectively one big happy party from their perspective at least. Pyro is clearly a well-practiced amateur dancer, although I will say that the motion can sometimes come off as aimless and floaty. A tier. The alcohol surging through Demoman's veins are clearly propelling him into a very, perhaps overly enthusiastic conga, an experience I'm sure we're all familiar with. If you pay attention to his head, it seems like Demo's moving his neck a lot, which on the one hand shows his energy and engagement with the music, but on the other hand seems like something that could lead to injury in a way you probably wouldn't see from a professional dancer. Demo's movements seem surprisingly coherent for someone drunk off his ass, and I do think there's a missed opportunity here for some of that scrumpy to show through more in his moves. So while there's disappointingly nothing special about Demoman's moves, there's also not much negative to say either. C tier. Oh yeah, people have been asking to see what's on my objector, so here. Heavy's movements flow very well for a man of his size. He's clearly excited at the prospect of doing a conga, and that shows in his moves. If you pay attention to his legs, his knees stay bent the whole time, reminiscent of the Kozotsky kick, which is of course appropriate given the Russian origin of both that style of dance and Heavy himself. Not to mention the required strength to remain in that pose while kicking out your legs for a conga. This is definitely emphasizing Heavy's characteristic power. Just like Demo, Heavy is letting his neck swing all over the place, shaking his brain around in his head in what I can imagine would be quite uncomfortable. This could be read as a lack of control in Heavy's movement, but that looseness combined with the coarse leg muscle engagement in his lower half is actually quite skillful to pull off, and makes me think Heavy might be more skilled than appears at first glance. I would say these loose head movements look like they could easily result in injury, but Heavy clearly has a lot of neck strength as you can see from the size of those muscles, so it's quite possible that his vulnerable joints and ligaments are well trained and protected from injury by the bulk of muscle. This is hard to judge, but I think Heavy's combination of free-flowing movement with core strength and intentionality do produce quite an interesting effect, landing him in high B tier. The engineer, well, he's quite clearly hitting that yonky sploinky. To be honest, he's the whole reason I wanted to make this video. Contrary to his analytical and detached personality, Engineer is flailing his arms with wild abandon. His conga is completely unhinged. At first I wasn't sure what to make of it, but upon further analysis I think it's clear that Engineer must be engaging with some principles of contemporary avant-garde dance technique. The seemingly improvisational but yet exactingly repetitional movements on display here demonstrate Engineer's unique approach to dance as performance art. In Deleuzian terms, Engineer is discarding the arborescent ways of thinking which have thus far repressed creative flows in the realm of the conga by producing a new deterritorializing flow in the shape of his radical performance, S-tier. Medic's particular hand motion around his face reminds me of the flashbang dance invented by Counter-Strike pro Jordan Nothing Gilbert. This dance has a sense of fashionability to it, the casual head nods from side to side reinforcing Medic's comfort in a conga line situation. Clearly this is a man who knows how to party. While the dance isn't particularly technically impressive, the execution nothing special, this does give off an attitude that this is a man who's in control of the situation, very much reflecting Medic's role on the battlefield, where his Ubers control the flow of a match. The tails on his medical coat flowing behind him add interest and dynamic motion to the dance, although that's more of a compliment to his fashion choices than his skill at dance. It's also worth noting that Medic is the only class who kicks on every beat, an interesting choice, but not one which I think makes any meaningful impact. It merely serves to distract from the heavy emphasis on the one which other mercs use. I would say that Medic is clearly a competent dancer, but there's nothing here which really hits me with a wow factor, so I'm going to put him in B tier. The primary element of note on display with Sniper's conga is his particular arm position. He is clearly waving his arms in the air, in much the same manner as one might if they just didn't care. While it could be said that Sniper's professional demeanour regarding his job as a sniper constitutes not caring, I would argue that this display of emotiveness and abandon goes contrary to his calm and focused attitude. Perhaps Sniper is the type who takes his job seriously so that he can party hard on the weekend, but I feel like this style of dance contradicts what we know about his characterization. Judged in its own terms though, I also can't help but think that this is just a worse version of Scout's conga, lacking the beat emphasizing claps and exchanging it for a messy and uncoordinated limb something. Legs shooting out without clear flow or motivation, needs work, D tier. And finally, we're at Spy. Something I've always thought was notable is the contrast between Spy's conga compared to his abject disdain on display during the square dance taunt. It would make sense with Spy's character that he sees the square dance as being beneath him, not nearly classy enough for a man of his caliber. Nonetheless, Spy is quite happy to engage with the conga. At first I thought that he was just playing along, putting in minimal effort, as his conga is clearly not very high energy. On closer examination, however, looking at Spy's precise head movements looking to each side in turn on the first beat of each bar, his lean back stance while retaining his weight on the balls of his feet, it's apparent that this man has some training in dance, albeit not a style of dance that's directly transferable to the conga. His movements are refined and smooth, but still demonstrate an appropriate engagement with the joyous energy of a conga. Recognizing a conga line as an inherently social activity, Spy has made the choice not to stand out or grab the spotlight from any of his teammates, although he is almost certainly the best dancer among them in any other setting. A very respectable choice, but without a clear demonstration of his true skill, I can't in good conscience rank him any higher than an A tier. Okay, thanks for watching, bye.